Before we get started, please check out our sponsor, Lear Capital. That's Lear Capital, the precious metals leader. Buy gold, buy silver, do it today. Hey everybody, I'm Christopher Green. You're tuning into AMTV Alternative Media Television. It is Friday, March 6, 2015. And Lord Rothschild of Rothschild Bank warns his investors of a multi-billion-dollar trust that he manages, of which he has hundreds of millions of dollars personally at stake, that this is the most dangerous period in history, in geopolitical history, since World War II. The previous year, he warned his same investors of 4 potential outcomes of this greatest of Great Depressions that we've been living through since the post-collapse of 2008 and 2009. And the Federal Reserve shenanigans of instituting 0% interest rates into infinity, although we allegedly had one of the best jobs reports in over a decade here in the US with the unemployment rate going to 5.5%, although we know that's bullshit and not true because the U6, the real unemployment rate, measuring people that are not just unemployed but underemployed, but have also just given up on finding work entirely because it's just too hard, is still above 10%. Warned his investors of 4 potential outcomes. Not only that the Great Depression was still very much on the table today, but there was also the possibility that we just muddled along. You know, post this Candyland world of 0% interest rates and bank bailouts into infinity, which I kind of think is what we've seen. It's masked the Depression, at least among many of the masses that are not awake to what's actually really happening structurally, festering at the criminal, privately run, unelected Federal Reserve. In addition to the Depression and muddling through being 2 potential possibilities, the third possibility was that America entered an economic renaissance. Yeah, that's right. Things were so good as a result of the massive debt Ponzi scheme that it translated into real growth. That 0% interest rates, since the post-collapse of 08-09, actually translated into a period of real economic growth in the United States. And his 4th potential outcome possibility that he wrote to investors, penned about a year ago, was that we enter a monetary shift in the way that we do business and in the way that we exchange goods and services, and that we completely move away from the old model. Now, what's interesting about those 4 different potential scenarios is that 3 out of the 4 scenarios, gold outperforms. In fact, the only period where gold does not outperform is in the Candyland environment of real economic growth and expansion as a result of more and more debt. The equivalent of just basically taking out more credit cards and piling that onto the old debt of 2008 and 2009. So very interesting that one of the banksters, Lord Rothschild, yes, that Lord of Rothschild Bank, warns that we're in the most dangerous period geopolitically that we've ever been in since World War II. That not just the threat of the dissolve of the European Union, well, we see this kick the can down the road strategy of countries like Greece and the Pigs Nation, the disintegration of a union that's only been around for roughly 20 plus years, but also these tensions that we're seeing in this new Cold War with Russia and parts of the world like Ukraine. In fact, his #1 objective of his multi-billion-dollar trust isn't even capital growth. It's capital preservation. His goal, a multi-billionaire, is to just not lose money. His investors aren't even looking for a return on their investment in this multi-billion-dollar trust anymore. They're just trying to protect it from this economic depression that we're currently in. I think Art Cashin of UBS, you're probably familiar with on CNBC, spoke today, this morning. He's been around for a very long time, says that the Federal Reserve has painted itself into a corner. You know, it's said and has said repeatedly, Janet Yellen has said repeatedly that they're going to be data dependent. Yet at the same time, when the data that they allegedly get is allegedly good, jobs growth, allegedly the best we've ever seen in 10 years, they're still sitting on their hands with interest rates. And the question is why? Is it that they just don't want to raise interest rates? Or is the real reason that they can't raise interest rates? That is because as a result of all of these shenanigans, of all these bailouts, all of this excessive debt, that they've only manufactured even greater, bigger, larger, more deadly and violent asset bubbles. And this should be obvious to most people at this point if you're not already awake. There is an obvious bubble in the U.S. equity market. There is an obvious bubble in the U.S. Treasury market with bonds. They are stratospheric. They are worse than what we had pre the 2008 and 2009 collapse. We are at record all-time highs across all the averages. The NASDAQ is back to NASDAQ 5,000. So the bubbles are there. We see this with interest rates, with real interest rates zero in many parts of the world, which is just insane. Paying governments and institutions to hold your own money, actually losing money by giving them your money in the bond market. This absolute insanity. Very interesting that Lord Rothschild would point this out, but I think it's a testament to just how dangerous this period of economic history truly is. One of the things Art Cashin also said is that when he's marinating his ice cubes, as he likes to say, having a drink of whatever he enjoys, probably scotch or something like that, with executives that run multinational and multi-billion-dollar corporations, they don't really want to admit it publicly, but in reality, they're terrified of the economy. They're terrified of these policies at the Federal Reserve because they know it can't last forever. Not only are they losing money with the dollar strengthening and the euro actually moving to parity with the US dollar, that is affecting multinational profits and their profitability, but they're terrified of these policies at the Federal Reserve. They are terrified of 0% interest rates. They are terrified of the short, medium, and long-term consequences of this Ponzi scheme. You know, Bernie Madoff really said it best when comparing his Ponzi scheme to the Ponzi scheme of the Federal Reserve, because it's the exact same model in place today. Again, a criminal, private, unelected body of people that have far more influence in the world and the economic landscape and the quality of life of not just Americans, but everybody around the world. Still not raising interest rates with an unemployment rate, according to them, even though we know it's bullshit, at 5.5%. Think about that for a minute. They're not going to raise interest rates with an unemployment rate, according to them, at almost 5%. I mean, this is absolutely insane. And you see, when they do raise rates, they're not really going to raise rates. It'll just be a small bump. It'll be a 25 basis points blip. It will be maybe, if they get aggressive, a 50 basis points blip, which still keeps the federal funds rate essentially below 1 and essentially at 0. That's how bad the economic situation actually is. And we're living, again, in this Candyland world of massive bubbles. And it's all going to come to an end. Again, what's interesting about these scenarios and the distribution chart that Lord Rothschild created for his trust, his multi-billion-dollar trust and his investors about a year ago, is that in 3 of the 4 scenarios that he pointed out, gold outperforms. The only scenario gold did not outperform was in the Candyland world of economic renaissance and economic expansion, which we know is not likely. Because if we are to look to history, if we're to take the advice of Lord Rothschild, if we're to understand that we are at great geopolitical risk, more risk than we've seen since World War II, the likelihood of more debt, more bailouts, and more scheming translating into economic growth is just not probable. And it's not likely to happen. Just like it didn't work in 2008 and 2009, it's not going to work today. Again, it's going to make what we experienced look like a church picnic. And you, the people, will pay the price. I'm Christopher Green. Get this video out everywhere, make it viral, hard-hitting it in your face, and click the link below to support our sponsor.